Hey guys, welcome back to the boat. Frank here. This is part 2 of the electronics upgrade, and I'm in the process now. Just came down the boat, put it down in the water, turned on the air conditioning in here. I have two 12,000 BTU air conditioners, one under here and one under this seat here. And so when I close the back curtains here, I can get decent air conditioning. I did put the screen on the front windshield to reduce the heat load from the sun, so it makes it comfortable in here, even though it's let's see, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, July 18, so it's about, I'm going to say it's about 85 degrees out. It's supposed to go up to about 90 today. But it's comfortable in here with the air conditioning going. The project, as I mentioned, is electronics upgrade. In last episode, we ran some cable from the radar arch for the new XM audio and weather receiver down to behind this helm panel. And that was a couple weeks ago that we did that. And last week I installed a new heading sensor and disconnected several of the NMEA 183 NMEA 0183 connections. The new chart plotters only have one NMEA 0183 port per display, whereas these older units have 4, 2 send and receive and 2 send only. So that's an older networking protocol, and one of my objectives with this upgrade is to eliminate all of the 0183 interfaces. And I disconnected my electronic compass, which had an 0183 input for heading, and replaced it with a new Garmin heading sensor, and I'll show you that when I open the dash up here in a second. And I also converted my depth sounder to from 0183 to NMEA 2000 or N2K. So both the new heading sensor and the sounder will both be N2K. The only other 0183 interface I have is my redundant GPS receiver, which I won't need anymore because the new chart plotters have GPS receivers built into them. So I'll have, with 2 chart plotters, I'll have 2 GPS receivers, and then I'll have my N2K receiver that also have up on the radar arch. So I'm basically going to disable the 0183 GPS receiver, disconnect it. So that'll eliminate all the 0183 network interfaces, give me strictly the N2K network and then the Ethernet marine network that connects many of the devices. So the task here is to remove these 2 displays, and multifunction displays or chart plotters. I just took the trim strips off. Comes with these trim strips to cover the screws. So just took all these off a minute ago. They just pop off, pry off, and only have 4 screws here holding each display in, 1 in each corner. Then I've got a template for the new opening, which I think will be a little bit larger. I'm going to put it on here and we'll see what it looks like. Cut a larger opening and drop in the new displays. Before I cut the opening larger, I'm going to hook up the new plotters electrically and make sure everything's working. I mean, I've hooked them up and run them from a battery pack in the shop, updated the charts on them, basically, make sure everything's working on them. but I'll hook them up here, make sure all the other devices, the radar and the AIS and the radio and everything, get recognized on the network before I actually cut the larger openings and drop the displays in. So the task now is to go ahead and remove these displays and work on unbundling the cabling which is behind the displays. Alright, so this is the cable arrangement on the back of the chart plotter. Got a video, and I think the NMEA 183 connections are there. I've got a couple of network connections, got a power connection, got an N2K connection to sort all these out. Alright, some of these I'll be able to reuse. I'll be able to reuse the N2K and the network connections. And let's see, this says NMEA there, power, video, N2K, network. Okay, so 2 network connections, video. I have video inputs. I have 2 cameras, one on the radar arch facing backwards and one in the engine room. So we'll need to reconfigure those. But I won't need this cable anymore. I won't need the NMEA 183 cable. Now it's just a matter of cutting the tie wraps and opening these cable bundles up and sorting out the old cables. I'll bring you back when I have, you know, the old cables removed and getting ready to put the new displays in. So I've got most of the excess cables out, the power and the video cables. I'm going to reuse the network cables, the N2K cables. So there's two network cables there, an N2K and N2K. A network cable here which says radar, and then I have another network cable which will run between the two. So one of these, since the new plotters only have two network connections on the back of them, I believe. That's correct. Two network connections on the back of them. I can't plug three, so I have to move one of these two, or the radar, maybe the radar would be easier, to the network switch. There's a network Ethernet switch back here which I have to move one of these cables to. So that'll work fine. Alright, next step is to wire the new chart plotters with power, plug in all the network and N2K cables, boot up the network, and let's see how it works. I've got the excess cables removed. I've moved one of the two Ethernet connectors to the Ethernet switch, which is down here, and I've wired the power leads to the switches here, and so I'm ready, and I've got the N2K connectors here, so I'm ready to hook up the new chart plotters and test them out. I won't have the XM audio or weather hooked up because we haven't replaced the antenna on the arch yet and installed the new electronics box, and I've got some more cabling to remove, so I do need to, I do have some cleanup to do after we get these installed, but of course the priority is to get the new plotters installed and working, and making sure that everything else on the network works okay. Alright, so let me grab one of the plotters over here. Alright, so this is the new display. And it fit on there like that. The other one over here. Alright, you can see on the back there's two Ethernet connectors, transducer, which I don't have, power connector, video, and N2K. So all this electronics is powered off, just FYI. So there's no risk of inadvertent electrical connection here. Power here. Okay, so that's one. Alright, here's the second unit. 32K. Just leaving the plastic on for protection. Make sure everything's turned off here. Alright, next step is to go ahead and power up the electronics system and turn the equipment on. Alright, so I've got depth from this sounder. I'm going to turn that off, turn the fish finder on. Alright, saying heading sensor requires calibration. I'm going to say later. New network configuration detected. Is this device newly installed on this network or was this pre-existing? So it's new. Some of it will be overwritten to match the network. Okay. Agree. They give you a warning. Let's go home. Alright, so it looks like I've got chart radar, dual radar, chart sonar, all sonar. So let's do chart radar, ready to transmit, menu, radar menu, transmit radar. Alright, looks like radar's working. Radar menu. Radar options. Back. Radar setup. Appearance. Color scheme. Black. I prefer the black. Okay. Back. 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 Okay. Chart plotter's working. Chart plotter's working. Radar. Go home. Let's look at sonar. Traditional. So sonar's working, radar's working. My VHF radio has GPS position information. I have keel offset must be affecting the difference between these two numbers here. Oh, actually, yeah, that would be the reason for that. Okay, so everything seems to be working. Radar, charts, everything. All right, the one thing I don't have is video hooked up. I need a bayonet connector. So I have RCA jacks on my video leads right now, and so I need a converter to change the bayonet connector to the, actually, is it bayonet? BNC, I'm sorry, BNC connector to RCA. I think I have one of those adapters. I have to look. Okay. All right. Gonna pause the video here, get the templates out, and look at what I need to do to enlarge the openings to fit these new displays. Using the dimensions off this template, which gives me a rectangular opening 13 5/8 by, well, I measured it, it's 8 3/16. The dimensions here are between the screw holes, which different from the dimension of the opening. Anyway, measured the opening on here using the bottom of here. I'm not going to go any lower than this. I have space up here, I have space inside here and here, I have space on the outside, but I don't want to go any lower because I'll run into these switches. So using this bottom as a reference and going, you know, halfway this way, basically splitting the difference, scribed the new opening. And so the next thing is just to, this is starboard, which is a polyethylene material, a UV stable polyethylene material. King starboard is what it's called. It's a 1/2 inch thick, and it's basically just a polyethylene. You can cut it with regular woodworking tools. Now, over on this side, underneath, I've got 3/4, I got a 1/4 inch of fiberglass, which is this gray, and then some plywood to deal with under here. So I will need to enlarge this opening, and I'll need to use the carbide edged multi-tool to cut the fiberglass. I don't need to, the only fiberglass I need to cut is behind this scribe line here, which is about a 1/2 inch wide. I've got about a 1/4 inch of fiberglass to remove back behind this panel. So this is easy, cutting the starboard here and here. Only need to remove about 3/16, 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 up here, 1/2 inch on this side, roughly 1/2 inch on this side, and I have space, or almost enough space over here. I may not have to cut any of the fiberglass underneath. So I'm going to use a multi-tool for all of the cuts because I really don't have room to fit a jigsaw in here to make the cuts. I have two multi-tools. I'm going to start off with my Milwaukee battery powered. This is an M12 battery powered multi-tool wood cutting blade. We'll see how this works. See how much I can get done. I have my corded Fane multi-tool up in the truck. Alright, I'm going to just cut a little bit of an angle, so I'm going to have to come back and trim that. I'm going to go get a hand saw that I can use to cut this, so I'll be back. Alright, so I got my coping saw here, which I think will work fine for this purpose. If a little bit slow, maybe. It's cutting fine. Alright, so really the last thing I need to do is trim this. The saber saw is not, really intended to cut through fiberglass. It cut this section, but it dulled pretty quickly and it started to wander, so I need to cut this back. I've got my fine, I guess it's fine, multi-tool here with a carbide blade. I'm going to go ahead and cut that back. I'll do that off camera and bring you back when I have the second display fitting properly. So this one's in and it's square, so I'm happy with the fit there. I do need to mount it, of course, and I'll take this cover off and install the gaskets and screws and trim strips. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and cut this back to make room for the other display. So I've taken the display out of here and moved it over here, and it fits fine, and it's square, so I'm happy with that. I do have a mess of shavings here, but this towel caught, I would say, 90% of the shavings, so I'm going to gather this up and put it in the trash. Bring you back when I get the displays ready to install. Alright, so I've got the displays installed here. Take the covers off. Boot everything up. The only thing I don't have hooked up yet is the video cameras. So I'm going to quit for the day. Alright, so I've got the display up here. And I have this one with radar, engine room camera, and another version of the chart. So everything seems to be working. XM radio is working now. Can't play much or they'll kill the videos. This is the new XM control box. This is the new heading sensor right here, and this is the network switch I've talked about a couple times. This is the N2K backbone here. So all the N2K devices attached to it. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then power. The yellow one is the power input. So that's operational. That's the GSD-24 sounder sonar device. Down here is the AIS transceiver. Of course, fuse blocks here, and a mess of wires, but everything's working. So a successful upgrade. All right, after I got the new chart plotters installed and quit for the day, I came back down the next day. This is 2 days later. I came back down the next day and took the boat out and went to calibrate the heading sensor, which is basically an electronic compass. And you turn the boat in a circle or 1.5 circles, and it calibrates the compass. It's called a flux gate compass. So it did not calibrate very well. I think the calibration was at 35, so somewhere between 0 and 100, and the closer to 100 the better, and it came out at 35. So as you know, as I noted, in the video just a few minutes ago, that it needed to be relocated, and I knew it needed to be relocated, so I've done that. This is a couple days after the chart plotter install, And I'm back down here on the boat again, and I'll show you what I've done with the heading sensor. So it was installed right down here on the shelf. I've moved it to a little 45-degree block of wood, and so this moves it away from all the wiring. So all the wiring that was around it down here, you know, carries current, and current carrying wires, you know, create a magnetic field, and this is so sensitive that it's, you know, affected by that. Now the calibration does take some of that effect out, but not completely. So I had space here since I removed the old XM receiver and the terminal boards that were terminal strips that were here for all the NMEA 183, 0183 interfaces. Freed up some space. So I mounted the heading sensor here, and it's N2K. That's all it has is an N2K cable. And I took the boat out yesterday and recalibrated it, and the calibration came in at 79, so which is pretty good. I've had on the previous heading sensor I had, which was basically using the electronic compass, which is right here. I had a calibration quality of 85, so 79 is pretty close to that, and it's certainly adequate for the purpose. And what that does, the reason the marine electronics calculates your course over ground, the direction the boat is moving. That may not always be the direction the boat is facing, because if you have wind, it's blowing you sideways, you have to turn the helm a little bit upwind to stay on, to follow a particular course line. So there's a difference between your course over ground, the actual path that your boat is following in the water over the bottom, and the boat's heading, or the way the boat is pointing. So if you're you could be, because of a wind or current, you have to, you know, turn the helm a little bit, so you're not necessarily going in the same direction your boat is pointing, though it may be pretty close. You're kind of crabbing along, moving sideways or not straight through the water in the direction the boat's heading. So you do need, for some applications, you do need a heading sensor. Now there's two reasons you need them. One is autopilot, that uses a heading sensor, and I do have a heading sensor on my autopilot, but it's a NMEA 183 interface. So let's see if you can see one of my neighbors here going by. There's a lot of boat traffic on this part of the river, especially on the weekends. So this is Friday morning, not too active. So the reason I need a heading sensor, want to have a heading sensor, is to enable MARPA, which is Mini Automatic Radar Plotting Aid. MARPA allows you to set a target on your radar and track its position over time, and if you don't have a heading sensor, that capability is not enabled. So that's the main reason that you want a separate heading sensor interfaced. The one on my autopilot is NMEA 183. I'm trying to get away from that. So this gives me an N2K heading sensor, and that gives me the ability to do MARPA, which is, you know, basically collision avoidance using your radar. It's one of the functions that's on most of the modern radars. All right, so that's one thing that let me push the helm back here. All right, in the first episode, I cut a hole in the radar arch right here, and I've gone ahead and made a little, this is actually starboard white polyethylene. I couldn't find pre-manufactured hatch, the right size. This is kind of small, so I made my own. White poly, a couple little screws, holds it in place, covers that, and I think it does a pretty good job of covering that up. Alright, so I'm going to wrap up this video at this point. I've got the electronics up and functioning, and the heading sensor calibrated. Everything seems to be working fine. There's several more things I'm going to do. I have, and I may put them on a follow-up video in a couple weeks. I've got a new instrument cluster ordered. This Garmin instrument is an older one, and I've ordered a replacement for it, which will match the appearance of the two chart plotters better. And so that's coming. And I've also ordered two new cameras, video cameras, one for the engine room and one for the radar arch. The one on the radar arch, the cable is starting to degrade and it needs to be replaced. The one in the engine room works fine, but the new one is wireless. It uses Wi-Fi. Since the chart plotters are Wi-Fi capable, you can add wireless devices, and so I'm going to experiment with that. I haven't had any wireless devices yet, but that seems to be, one of the newer technologies that these chart plotters will allow me to use. The engine room camera basically just monitors the engine room. Obviously, when you're running the boat, you want to know what's going on in the engine room. I will do engine room checks periodically during a long trip. I just got back last week from a 200-mile trip, which took me to 4 different ports, within a 100-mile radius of here. And so running at 22, 23 knots or 25 miles an hour, most of the runs were 3 or 4 hours long. And during 3 or 4 hours, you want to keep track of what's going on in your engine room. I mean, you don't normally expect any problems, but certainly awareness, situational awareness, is important on a boat, both around you and on the boat. So that's the reason for a lot of the instrumentation, is to give you situational awareness. Obviously, you got engine instrumentation and some idiot lights on the dash, which tell you about bilge pumps and that kind of thing. But being able to look at the engine room remotely is helpful in case you get I guess potentially you could get a water leak. And actually, on a previous boat, this is 12, 13 years ago, 14 years, maybe 2010, so 12 years ago, I was pulling out of a marina and looked at the engine room camera and saw water droplets going in front of the camera. So I quickly opened the engine room hatch, and I saw a water leak from one of the shaft seals. Now the shaft seals were so-called dripless shaft seals, and so what it was just some dirt in the seal faces. So I just was able to pull the seals apart and let them go back together, and it cleared the debris. It was a piece of grass or something, probably. So having that camera in the engine room alerted me to a potential problem that would have caused a lot of water to come into the boat, or potentially a lot of water. So that's a reason for having an engine room camera, and the bigger boats obviously have multiple cameras. I eventually will place 2 in this engine room. I have one, but it's not in the ideal position. I'm going to probably relocate it. And so that's a reason for having that video feed to your displays, is so that you can monitor the engine room. And then the camera on the radar arch pointing rearward is to give you, quick indication if somebody's coming up on you from behind, or that sort of thing. So again, situational awareness. That completes the major portion of this electronics upgrade. I do have, as I mentioned, a new instrument display, 2 new cameras, and a new Garmin radio to install, and I'll do that probably within a month. I will make a comment about marine electronics in general, and I think it's best to stay with one brand so that if you have interface issues, you don't have one company pointing their finger at another company and saying it's not their fault, it's the other person's fault. So keeping to one brand within your suite of electronics, I think, is a good idea. I like Garmin. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that are good. Ray Marine and Furuno, and there's others. So I don't know that one is any better than the other. I'm familiar with Garmin. I've had Garmin for years. So that's kind of what I've stuck with. And since I have a Garmin radar, which I have not changed out my radar on this upgrade, that may be a future upgrade, but that's a sizable investment too. So, all right, if you have any questions about this stuff, put them in the comments below. I do read all the comments. I hope you found this exercise a little bit interesting, maybe learned a little bit. Look who's here. Look who's here. Huh? Couple of buddies. Brutus and Butchie. Alright, so I thought I'd just stop back up here in the shop now that I'm done with at least the phase 1 of the electronics upgrade, and I figured I hadn't had the boys in, I don't think they were in the first episode, and I figured everybody likes the boys, so I thought I would just swing by here, closing out this video. I wonder if anybody wants a treat. Anybody want a treat? Let me open this treat bag. You're very well behaved. No, sit. Brew, get down. Sit. Sit. All right, good boys. It's so hot outside. It has got to be 95 degrees. We're just having a heat wave. It's funny. People are saying it's unseasonably hot, but I can remember many times where we'd be over 100, and over 100 for days and days at a time. So while it's 95 degrees or 96 degrees, supposed to be 96 or 97 the next couple days, it's midsummer. That's what we get. And I haven't seen 100 degrees in 3 or 4 years. We haven't hit 100 degrees, and we used to hit it all the time. I can remember having 5, 6, 7, 8 consecutive days of 100 degrees. So anyway, it's still hot and humid. So we finished up the part 2 video here, and that's the phase 1 of the electronics upgrade on the boat. I've been using the boat all season so far. But I got another long trip planned for August, about a 400-mile trip, 10 days. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So the electronics are done. If you have any questions about the electronics in general, or any specifics, or you saw anything you didn't understand, put a comments in down below. And Butchie won't let me walk away. He's following me around. He won't let me walk away. the shop, it helps that the shop here is air conditioned. I think it's set to 72. It's nice and cool in here. So they're hanging out in here most of the time in this weather. But yeah, if you have any questions or comments or didn't understand something, put a comment down below. I'll answer it if I can. I do read all the comments. I appreciate your comments. And so I hope that interlude into marine electronics was of interest to at least some of you guys. Maybe you learned a little bit. It's an interesting topic, so there's a lot to learn, and I'm by no means an expert, though I have been involved in installing my own marine electronics for decades. I mean, since the early 90s. So that's what, 30 years. Some of that interest stems from my interest in computers. I build my own computers. I set up my own network at the house. So I'm tech savvy as regards computers. I got my first computer in the early 80s, and have had every generation of computers. Now I'm all Intel or PC, Windows based. I'm not into the Apple stuff, but some of my interest in electronics, I guess, stems from that. I will tell you here that I've cleared a little space behind the dozer. And actually, I need to move this out. I need to make some space out in the garage. But I'm getting geared up here for the next big project, and I'm not ready to reveal it yet, but it's going to be interesting. I do have a donor tractor, and I'm going to bring it over here. Most of you will be surprised. Most of you will be very surprised. But it's something I need, and I think I would really use. I've kind of been jury-rigging that task for a while, so it'd be nice to have an actual functional piece of equipment. So that'll be interesting. And there's Brutus inside. Come back in because it's so hot out. All right. Gonna sign off. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys on the next video.